Fascinating. This is Gabrielle Ruiz, and you are watching TrekCulture.
Seamless intro, lads. Absolutely
Perfect.
seamless intro. Oh my goodness. Hi Ryan, hi Sirach, how are you?
Awesome.
Doing great.
Excellent.
It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon for us, Saturday evening for you, right?
It is Saturday evening, and it's actually, I have to say, it is very, very nice. It's still bright because yay summer. And even though it's Ireland, it's actually not chucking down raining at the moment. So this is an absolute win for us.
Before we get started, can I just ask you, Sean? I'm sorry. What's Ireland like? I've never been. I've always wanted to go. And Sirach, have you been?
I can't say I've never been. I've only been to the airport in Dublin. Okay. So I guess if you want to count that, but no, I've never seen the city.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll tell you in a second. Funny enough, I don't immediately discount that because that's my claim to having been in Chicago, as I've passed through O'Hare.
Okay.
So, I mean, technically,
yeah, it's like it's a NAM, not a parent's NAM.
I mean, look, there's a lot of the stereotypes are true. It's very green. It rains a lot. The people are generally quite friendly, and there is. I mean, the home of Guinness is in the middle of Dublin, so
yeah, Guinness. From that, that's all I got at the airport was Guinness. I got sensory overload of straight Guinness everywhere. Guinness here, Guinness there. I was like, wow, it's one of the central themes of visiting Dublin.
I mean, it kind of. Do you know what? Like, we have so much to offer and everything, but we know what there is an image of Ireland, and we have leaned into it. And I think we've somewhat mastered it. I mean, there is other things to do. Don't get me wrong. Before the Irish Tourism Board comes after me, there is other things to do.
Green and lush and rainy and fresh air sounds amazing to me. I love it.
We literally have, and one thing that was impressed on me recently is that recently I was in the States. I was over for one of the conventions in Long Island, and then we went to Ticonderoga, and I realized we spent about 2 days driving. It takes 5 hours to drive top to toe in Ireland. You can do the full country. And I was like, my God, why is America so big? I've changed the theme of the episode. That's the episode. Why is it so big?
It's mostly ego, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, overcompensating for something else.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's 4 hours is the 4 or 5 hour drive that you're talking about is how long it takes from here to Vegas. So I'm just imagining that I could see the whole of Ireland in one Vegas trip.
You literally can, and like that's long ways. Width, you'll do Ireland in less than 3 hours. Which is, and I remember feeling, oh, that's a bit of a drive. You know?
Sometimes it takes 3 hours to go 10 miles out here.
Here in LA, you could drive for 3 hours and go from LA to LA. So
from downtown to the beach.
Yeah, literally.
I will say I've been super. Everyone, thank you everyone for coming. By the way, everyone's here on the show. It's like I thought they were going to talk about, but no, this is really important stuff. I've been lucky enough to visit LA a couple of times, and I've been super lucky when it came to traffic. I will say that. So like I never had to do like the 9 a.m. rush or the 5 p.m. I didn't have to do any of that, which I think is like, so I've got this warped idea of what traffic in LA is actually like. It's like it's fine, people talk, and then you see the pictures of like, your 11 lane wide highways, and it's, the cars are stacked like miles back. How does anyone get anything done?
We don't really get anything done. Mostly in the phone, not the car. But Sean, what I was thinking of when you said that, I was thinking how sci-fi and Star Trek doesn't get enough credit for alleviating us of the burden of traffic. Can you imagine that the captain's like, warp 7, and like, sorry sir, it's jam packed. We gotta go, like we can only go warp 0.2 right now. It's traffic like crazy.
like, or even think of the stations. Like, right, I'm going to take off of this runabout. And I'm going to go off, and you get O'Brien going. That's got to be 4 hours minimum. Yeah, that's not happening yet. That's not happening today.
There's another way. Let's look. Let's bring out the old Thomas guide.
Oh, I've never used one of those things. That's intimidating.
Oh yeah, well, these apps are basically your GPS is a virtual Thomas guide, so it's the same thing. But that would be the Waze app or something to that effect for a spaceship to see what the Enterprise is like. 45 minutes this way, an hour and 13 this way.
Well, they kind of do that, right? Don't they say, 7.3 Mark 1 or something? Isn't that what?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's like, kind of space is 3D. I mean, flying cars eventually will do it, and no one's going to stick to a lane. I mean, like, I can fly over it. I'm doing that. That's 100% what I'm doing.
Can I tell you very quickly? I'm so sorry. We're hardly talking about Star Trek. My thoughts on flying cars. I don't know if it will happen, because the regulation for it will have to be immense. Because if your car breaks down on Smith and Wesson Road, no big deal. If your flying car breaks down anywhere, you're killing a home of 7 people under you. So you'll have to be restricted to flying only over freeways and streets or something like. And even freeways, you can land on another car. So you would have to be like have your own air freeways where there's nothing below you. I don't know. I'm not sure how that would work. I can only see how it could not work.
I totally get that as well. And it is the thing, it's never discussed. It's never discussed in like your Blade Runner or Fifth Element or something like that, or even like Attack of the Clones. I mean, like, Anakin probably caused so many accidents in that car. Someone's just on their way to work or whatever. Then the next thing is like, who the hell was that for?
Well, thanks for bursting my flying car bubble, guys.
I know.
That's a real downer.
It's so sad.
Well, I can cheer everybody up again because Happy Pride Month.
All right. Yeah.
Happy Pride Month to you too.
In fact, I tell you what, we'll totally cheer everyone. Chris, if you can hear me, we're not really pridey enough on the video. Can you pride us up a little bit? Hey.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Now it's impossible to be sad or bubbles burst when you've got this going on. Right?
It makes me wish I had worn my Lambda Quadrant shirt. Shout out to our good friends over at Lambda Quadrant and the great work that they do.
I know Lambda Quadrant. I know them.
That would have been appropriate. I'm sorry I didn't think of that.
That is quite okay. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
I can understand that.
So I mean, sorry, 10 minutes in, lovely chat to everyone, but to everyone who's very confused in the comments right now, being just like, I'm sure this was about something. We're here to talk about obviously Pride as a whole, and really with a focus on DS9, because DS9, hardly a shock to anyone, was certainly at the time the most progressive Star Trek show, I think, of them all, which is, every Star Trek got a little bit more progressive as it went along, and then DS9 said, hold my beer. And so I suppose in a way I want to jump straight into that, because right there, the relation, because Pride means so many things to so many people, and what DS9 did was it brought representation to a whole new level. And as we go on, we will talk about where it did great and maybe where we might have assigned more to it than it was able to do. But I mean, this was the 90s, so but we'll get to that. But for yourselves, that initial, obviously, Sirach, for yourself, you get the script. Kind of what does this look like to you, DS9, and how it's about to approach the 24th century?
So I grew up here in Los Angeles and really in West Hollywood. So I went to, local schools out there, and my upbringing is multicultural and multi-ethnic. And to me, that's one of the elements that stood out to me about the show was a kind of multi-ethnic approach to storytelling, where there are different demographics of people, aliens, and all kinds of cohabitating in a space and finding ways to build a life in a space station. So that to me was this. That's where it sets, the stage is set.
And Ryan, for yourself, then, you're watching Emissary. What does, you're obviously you've seen every episode of the original series at this point. You've seen all of TNG. You've committed them all to memory. So then you watch Emissary, and what's that initial reaction like?
Well, actually, my journey was a little different with Star Trek. I had only seen a couple movies of the original series, I think. And then, when I was just like a toddler or whatever that was. And then I'd seen a lot of The Next Generation, and I loved it. And I didn't see Emissary until way later, because back then we only had like VHS tapes was the best we could do, And I remember my friend was like, dude, you if you love Star Trek, you got to watch Deep Space Nine too. And this was, and I was like, really? Is it cool? Because I only really knew Next Generation. He's like, dude, they've got this race called the Jem'Hadar, and they're part of the Dominion and all this. I was like, what? Star Trek's getting crazy like that? He's like, yeah. And then, watch it. Cisco was amazing. I loved all the stories. So I went nuts for it. So then I had to go into like some local whatever comic shop and buy Emissary on VHS tape, which I still have. And I watched it, and I remember being blown away, thinking, oh my God, this is so much better than the Next Generation's first episode, because I had that on VHS too. I had to go buy, everything was like $19.99 for one episode. And I would spend whatever little money I had. So anyway, to answer your question, I was actually blown away by the Emissary, especially the first 5 minutes, where I was like, whoa, they're doing something here. They're doing something real.
That is actually, it's so funny because I think, look, with love, Encounter at Farpoint certainly is an episode.
Two, unfortunately.
It's chalk and cheese when you think like DS9 Emissary came with a statement, and Encounter at Farpoint. So Emissary came with a statement, and and of course one of those is how family is going to look in the future. We had straight away the commander of the station, single father raising his son. And we had seen a captain and a son before. We had, of course, Kirk and David Marcus, but it was a very different situation. Marcus wasn't there from the jump. It was less about Kirk being a father. It was more about how long does it take Kirk to get his son killed. Whereas you're there, episode 1, and in 1993, single father family units weren't exactly 10 a penny on television.
No, they weren't.
Penny.
Yeah, I had to figure that one out. 10 a penny.
Oh, sorry.
Is that like 10 cents? Is that 10 cents? 10 a penny.
My brain just popped.
I overloaded you.
I was like, I know those words, but I...
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's I'll take 10 for a penny. Is that what it means? Like a whole bunch. Okay, I got it. 10 a penny. No, it wasn't a lot of that on television. And the fact that they decided to take that kind of a choice in that time, I believe Paramount and the powers that be deserve a lot of credit, including Rick Berman and Michael Piller and folks that were there at that decision-making point. So yeah, I think that's like kudos to them for taking that kind of a risk to tell a story about a black man raising his child as a single father in the future. And honestly, the opening kind of scene in Emissary where Cisco is combatively having a face-off with Picard.
Yeah,
is an interesting way to kind of set your story up for this series, because Obviously, Picard is somebody who the fans have already grown attached to, and is a beloved character at the time of Deep Space Nine's premiere. So having somebody that comes and bat heads with him to that degree, based on the principle of of what happened at Wolf 359. So based on that action, there was cause for this kind of friction, but still, nonetheless, to have him stand toe to toe with somebody like Picard, who has a kind of gravitas, is a great way to start the show with drama, and that's what we're doing on Star Trek. Because it ultimately is a drama series, even though it does have a lot of comedy sprinkled into it. Thanks to the likes of Armin Shimmerman and Rene Auberjonois and Max Kredenchek, and those people sprinkling a little bit of humor, including Andrew Robinson. I mean, there's a lot of it. Alexander Siddig did a little bit of humor inside of his stuff, just little twinges of it, not over the top stuff, but just enough where it kept it light, even though we were dealing with heavy subject matter.
I think as well, not now, obviously don't discredit yourself as well. There's plenty of laughs around Jake.
I had a little, I had some jokes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I transferred my early class clown Ciroc self and transported it into a, this kind of a future setting. So I was able to really play and be fun with it. So yeah, I definitely approached the work with a lightheartedness, with a sense of play, a sense of comedy, a little bit. Yeah, it's let's have fun if we're going to do this.
Was there a single costume you got to wear that was comfortable?
No, they started to get comfortable. Yeah, not till like the fifth season, around fourth or fifth season, when it started to like, I started to pull some weight around the set and say, hey, give me something softer and more comfortable, because it's not fun to wear wool in the summertime when you're running through sand dunes or something, and it's like that's when you realize I can't do this. On an air-conditioned sound stage, it's a different story though, right? Because you're just sitting there and it's nice and cool. But when you're out on location and it's summertime, it's not. That's when you realize I got to get a better outfit than this. This is not worth it.
I was thinking because they were also form fitted, and I know as myself, after a certain age, if I have a pea for lunch, it shows. So but sort of going back to like the early days, how much of, because am I right to say you're kind of 11, 12, 13 doing the pilot, how much of what they're trying to do are you kind of aware of at that point? Like, are you sat down and told this is going to be the show where we push barriers? Or are you told, learn your lines, come back in tomorrow? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's the conversation like at that point?
Yeah, they didn't say this is the show we're going to try to push barriers. That's just what they did, what they wrote. That's the genius of Ira Bear and the writers staff, Ron Moore and Renee and the whole group. So I would say they push barriers because they are smart men that have lived through whatever experiences that they lived through and how they process those experiences, and decided to tell these impactful stories that people usually stay away from. When you talk about Deep Space Nine, you're talking about a show that really dives right into religion with the whole Bajoran cultural religion. So they dive into that. They dive into sexuality. They're not afraid to talk about politics. Another thing that is something you're supposed to stay away from at the dinner table. And yet, Deep Space Nine kind of really talks about these subjects. By putting them in the form of this context of science fiction and these shows and these storylines. So when you see the battle for power within the Bajoran ranks between the Kai Wynn and Kai Opaka and those kinds of struggles that were happening between the Kais and the Vedics. Starting off the season with that. Those are political struggles. You talk about the religious aspect of the Zoran culture. Cisco being a kind of reluctant participant in that storyline, and then kind of through his own character evolution, realizing that it's something that he actually embraced at some point, right? That he actually believed, which is another thing that we talk about in the show, which is faith. Another well kind of explored subject. But drama is what the writers did a great job of writing. And when you have the drama, you have the conflict, you have the both sides of an argument, and that's where you get good debate, right? Or you get good television, you get good whatever's on screen comes out good. When you have people arguing their points, I feel like Duet did that as good as you can do that, basically. I think in law school they teach you to be able to argue both sides of the point, and when you debate, they just put you on one side of an issue and you have to debate that side as right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like Duet is an example of that, watching two people debate their points of view.
That is, I think Duet obviously stands out for so many reasons, but also because it is a first season episode. So we're talking year one. They came out the gate running. And that it's an unfair stereotype, but there's a stereotype that the first season of a lot of shows tend to be where people are finding their feet, they'll take swings, but there was such a strong message there from the beginning. I just want to highlight a couple of things really quickly. Chuck, thank you so much for your donation there. Very nice. And also, Chuck, annoying critic. This is a really interesting question. Were you or Avery ever dissatisfied with there not being more episodes like Far Beyond the Stars or Past Tense?
I would say that Avery, Mr. Brooks would advocate on my behalf to get me to have better stories and more work or material to do. He felt like I was being underutilized a lot. Mm-hmm. And so he wanted the writers to challenge me. And so if there was somebody who was dissatisfied, it would be him. I was happy to be working and not making too many waves. But at the same time, Mr. Brooks understood that I had a lot of potential and capabilities to take on heavier material. And so he challenged the writers to do that for me and basically lessen the role of me as a kid, just saying, Dad this, Dad that, and really having my own identity, my own storylines. And so you saw some of that kind of emerging because of his advocacy for me. Episodes like Nor the Battle to the Strong began to emerge.
I think that is, it's hard not to list that one when you think of some of the most hard hitting scenes. Because if there's one thing DS9 did, is with all of the comedy and with all of the lightness, is God, you set out to traumatize people.
Yeah, not me. I was the victim of some of that drama. No, not me. Remember, I tell Ira all the time. I'm like, so you started the show, you killed my mom. You ended the show, you killed my dad, and then in the documentary, you want to kill my best friend in season 8. I'm like, why me though? What did I do to you guys? You write some good stuff for Jake.
You're just the bad luck guy. The bad luck kind of happens around you. But I wanted to kind of add to what Sirach was saying when I'm looking back at the episodes, because we went over all 173 or 76 of them, my favorites changed by a long shot. And when I look back now, the two episodes that stand out the most are Explorers, because that is the one with Jake and his dad, and I don't know why. It's just like more of that. You know, the Dominion, when I was a kid first watching it, Dominion Wars, amazing, blows your mind. It's beautiful, it's brilliant. But once we've got that story in our back pocket and we've heard it and we've watched it and we've soaked it in, we realize that the real good, solid episodes are episodes like Explorers, and the other one is Take Me Out to the Holosuite, which gave me such joy. When I first saw it, it was okay, but I was like, oh, this is weird, a baseball episode. I love sports, but it was just kind of out of the blue when I'm watching the Dominion Wars. But now just watching it by itself, it's a perfect episode. It's so joyful. It gives me such joy and happiness, and you know, it makes you laugh. It was the perfect episode, that one and Explorers. So, you know, it doesn't fully touch on what the question was, but to me, I would have loved to see more episodes of just centered around Jake and his dad. I thought those ended up being really powerful, good episodes to me.
Explorers also does stand up for me because it reminds me of like a camping trip that I had when I was a kid. There's that family trip that you have when you're growing up, that, you know, it might be a camping trip, it might be you know, skiing. I don't know what it is, but for each person out there, but there's that moment kind of where it's like, oh yeah, I remember that time, you know, that we went and did that thing that we don't normally do, whatever it is. And so yeah, that whole bonding moment, it kind of harkens back to seeing young Jake and Cisco fishing in the opening, in the Emissary, right, in the pilot. It's just like, oh yeah, that's what you do. You go fishing. You know, it's like me now as a dad. I go to the basketball game and watch. You know, there's like certain things that you do, or you go and have dinner together, and you know, there's certain things that are just like part of the tradition of parenthood and parenting.
What do you reckon? Here's a nice small question. What do you reckon you've learned about parenting from your relationship with Mr. Brooks?
What I learned from him was to express how you love somebody. Express that you love somebody. Say that you love them. Show that you love them. Tell them you love them. Or specifically, you know, I give my daughter a kiss on the forehead a lot, or I give her a hug. And
that's an Avery move right there.
Yeah, the physical aspect of telling somebody that you love them, you know, and showing them. So that's one thing I got from him. I often do his move and you know, kiss my daughter on the forehead or grab her and give her a big hug. So yeah, I got that from him. You know, and then I've heard about people and who have talked about, and this is sad, but it is a reality for a lot of people that say, you know, I grew up and my dad never said that he loved me, you know, or I never heard the words, or he never, you know, gave me a hug, or you know, one of those kinds of, you know, pick me up moments. So I think that is important to do. It's a small thing. It doesn't cost you anything, but it just lets somebody know, oh, I'm there for you. Don't worry. I got you. You know, I'm here to, you know, to be somebody who's you can lean on and who's always going to be rooting for you. So it means a lot. It goes a long way.
That's I think as well, because it is one of the things that is so patently obvious for, you know, the entire run of the show. There was never, I mean, other than, you know, the odd moment here, there was never a strained relationship. There was never, you know, kind of fighting back against dad, or dad doesn't understand son, which is of course completely realistic for all father-son relationships. I've never had crossed words with my dad. But even those parts then when, you know, you could see Jake is ready to sort of do his own thing, there is, you know, the question is there, like, oh, I thought you were going to do Starfleet or something, but there's always the understanding, and that was a wonderful thing to watch. growing up as well. Now, I'm lucky I have a good relationship with my father, but I can understand a lot of people watching that and being just like, I needed that. I needed to see that on screen.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is kind of an advanced move in the parent-child relationship, going from the other way now, from the child to the parent, in that direction. And they wrote this well for Wesley Crusher's character. There was a moment when Wesley sensed that his mom liked somebody, and he was like, "Hey, there's something going on here," and he kind of pulls her card. And there's an honesty there between the two of them, where she's kind of like, "Yeah, you know what, you got me. Is it that obvious?" kind of a thing. But I love that relationship dynamic, because that's a level of maturity that, as you grow up as a child, you can start to make those kinds of comments, right? Because as a small kid, you're not going to say anything about your parents' relationship with anybody, right? But as you grow up, you can start saying, "Hey, what's going on over there? I think you like him or her," And so though you can start calling them out a little bit, because you know them and you feel you're closer to being an adult. So Jake shows some of that when he tells his dad that, "Hey, there's this freighter captain that I know. I think should be good for you." You know what I mean? And he's like, he's hooking his dad up, man. So that's a level of maturity too, as well, that I think that Jake showed as a character.
I think Jake is a character, and I presume, we got obviously more of Jake than we got of Wesley, but I think it's true for both that from episode 1 onwards, there's a rapid maturity. I think Jake, obviously Wesley lost his father, Jake lost his mother, but I think Jake has more room to mature, I think, than Wesley did, just for the sheer number of episodes. But yeah, because it's season 3 or something, like, you're, kind of like you're playing matchmaker. It seems like 20 episodes before, you were the little kid doing fishing on the holosuite. You're like, what did I miss here? Okay, fair enough. It seems like next episode
you date a few Dabo girls,
You did date a few Dabo. So that was one of my next topics I want to get onto. Is like, we explored Jake's love life. And the sheer turnstile that was Jake's love life.
No, I learned from Riker. No, did I say that out loud? No.
Oh my God.
No, Jake did explore his dating options early on, and apparently he likes to date older Bajoran women, and that seemed cool at the time, and I really didn't have a problem with it. But Dad had a problem with it. And that's that's another thing that was just naturally kind of flowed with the show, was that dynamic too, the protectiveness of a father, protecting his kid, and that's a natural, normal thing to see, kind of explore, and also for the child to try to explore their boundaries and blossom into young adulthood. So all of those things were well done in my my reflection of it.
I think so as well. I'm not 100% on the episode it is, but when is it Marta? And she is a little bit older, and she's a Dabo girl, and we have dinner, and there's Ben sitting there going like, I may have misjudged you. But I suppose, yes, there is this idea of like, well, as a parent, I know what's best for my child.
I mean, there is a degree of that. So I do think that there are lessons that I've learned along the way about, my mom or dad being right. I hate to admit it in a lot of times when they are right, but they've been right about certain people that I hung out with. For example, when they said, I don't think that person is a good friend for you to hang out with. And I would be resistant to that and say, what do you mean? This is a great guy or whatever. And they may have been right about that person in the long run of things now with hindsight as a measuring stick. You can see that, yeah, your parents in some cases do know what's best for you and do know that, hey, this is a bad influence on you. This person's bringing out different emotions out of you. Your behavior changes when you're around these people. So yeah, I think there is a certain degree of truth to that. But on the flip side, there is a truth to young people kind of exploring their way and figuring out what works for their reality. And I say that because I remember when I was a kid and my mom would say, "You're wasting time playing video games." And
But now
you can never go anywhere playing video games. It's a waste of your life. And maybe at that time for her life, in her generation, in her upbringing, that would be true. But it's not true for the generation that I grew up in that are now, video game programmers or live twitching on, live stream playing games or whatnot. So no, there's actually people that can make a living off of playing video games, and the young generation saw that before the older generation could see it. Same with other things like skateboarding. I mean, you're wasting your time going outside playing skateboards, trying tricks.
Ooh.
Well, Tony Hawk wasn't wasting his time, and the many people that have come after him that have made millions of dollars. So, it's there's a level of, my generation thinks that's wrong, and that you shouldn't do that. But that's based on our lived experiences. And as time goes on, different things change. And now, you might think being on your phone and social media is a waste of time now. You would say that to your kid. But now there's kids streaming and TikToking and making millions of dollars doing that. So, to a degree, a parent knows what's right. And to a degree, a child knows what's right. And there is a balance there. Sometimes you have to let your kid go with their gut instinct sometimes. And sometimes you really got to put your foot down on your gut instincts when you think absolute about it. So, it's a give and take.
I mean, I absolutely agree. In a way, actually, this is quite a nice segue into the next section, which is, obviously we have a Pride theme around this episode. We are in Pride Month at the moment. And what you said as well about basically generational understanding and growth. We have DS9 is often lauded as, the first Star Trek to take on issues of LGBTQIA plus members of the community, of queer representation. And I would love to really discuss this with you, because DS9 has the first same-sex kiss in Star Trek history, of course, rejoined. And there are characters, there's been discussion of the character of Bashir and how there's quite a lot of queer coding there. And of course, Garrick, and there's queer coding there. And in a way, you are in the unique position. You were there on the ground, so you can see what's happening around you at the time. You know what was happening on set. We perhaps watched it and assigned our understanding to it. And obviously the conversation in years past have gone, we have, if you ask anyone now, and Garrick is as queer as the hills. And Andrew Robinson certainly played him that way. But there was a deliberate decision, like, nope, we're killing that story. That's not happening. How much of that, my very long-winded intro into this is, how much of that is evident on set? So like a script like Rejoined is coming up, there's going to be discussions.
Rejoined was directed by Avery Brooks, if I'm not mistaken. And because Mr. Brooks is sensitive to people's individual autonomy, their rights, he was very sensitive about how he was going to play that episode. And one of the things that he did as a way to protect the integrity of the material was make it a closed set in which the press can't be there. You know, your sister and your mama and your cousin and everybody from the writer's office and everybody from the production and you know, sometimes you'll get the occasions where everybody wants to be there. And it's okay in certain circumstances, like in Far Beyond the Stars, for example, when we were filming that. I remember everybody from the Paramount lot was there. I mean, executives were there. It was just like, it was ridiculous. The publicity people were there. Not really pressured. No, it's just everybody wanted to see it because it was a big spectacle. It was, you know, old cars and, you know, kids playing by the fire hydrant and it was outdoor set. It was just a lot of people wanted to be there to watch the magic happen. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that Rejoined would have had the same kind of spectacle about it because it was about these kiss and, you know, this intimate moment and everybody wants to see it happen. And so, you know, here comes Entertainment Tonight or the TV Guide or whoever it could be to kind of like really like be there to witness the moment, you know, as it happened. But I think Mr. Brooks did not want it to be a spectacle. He wanted to approach it with a level of seriousness and a level of integrity to keep it something that was special and intimate and magical. So yeah, I think that was the approach, and to a larger to speak to a larger way in which Deep Space Nine was able to kind of fly under the radar and be able to attack this kind of subject matter and, you know, wave the flag for you know, diversity and for equity and for human rights. One of the reasons that it was able to do that so well is because it was being kind of overlooked by the studios, right? Because you remember Deep Space Nine was sitting in this weird window in which the studios were focused on the end of the Next Generation, and they were also focused on the launching of Paramount as a network, the UPN, and Voyager was coming up. So we only had a small window in which we were the focal point where they were looking over our shoulder.
6 months. 6 months.
Was it 6 months?
It was half a season.
Yeah, that was the window in which they were able to look over our shoulder and say, "What's going on over here? What are you guys doing here?"
6 months, where there's an executive going, "All right, what are you doing on that show?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and you know, that kind of goes back to the earlier point that I was making about the different perspectives between the parent and the child. If the parent in this situation is the studios and the child is the show itself, then in this case, the child knew what was best. Mm-hmm. The parent, as the studio, would have said, "No, you shouldn't. Don't touch that. Don't touch that material. Don't go there. Don't talk about this subject. We don't do that. We're cool with couples sleeping in separate beds, you know, and we don't even want to talk about this stuff. It's I Love Lucy type of, you know, approach to television. Like, we know you're married, but we don't want to see you kiss, you know." That's what the studio thinks, and that's how they approach television. But thankfully, because nobody was looking over the shoulder, Ira felt like he had the green light to just basically play with all the subject matter that was controversial and that people were afraid to talk about and wouldn't give any light to these kinds of stories. So thankfully, for all of those kinds of combinations of factors of things, and for the people who are involved, people like Avery Brooks, people like Terry Farrell, Renee Auberjonois, and then now who take their acting as a source of expression and performance, and who understand that it's this powerful medium to storytell. They understood the power that the messages were going to have inside of the material, so they expressed it in that way. And then lastly, I will say it's also about each individual's ability to express love for all kinds of people and not have any kinds of prejudices about what they dislike or like, and to be able to freely love everyone. So I think those are the factors that were all at play in this kind of melting pot of ideas at this particular time in the 90s.
This is very much a question for you both now. As 30 years on, hindsight, you reviewed the whole show, you've gone back through it. Some of the critiques that Ira himself obviously laid against the show, particularly in the documentary, which I thought was fair play. It was an honest review. So that's how fair do you think some of that critique is in terms of how far it went? Could it have gone further in the 90s?
I'll jump on that because I think you're kind of answering the question in the question. It's I agree. In the 90s, they did what they could. They did more than they could because the CBS eye was not really on them. So we're all going to be our own worst critics. And usually the outside world is going to say, no, you're wrong. You did your best. But the other side of that is, what do we always say internally? Yeah, but I could have done better. Even if everybody says, no, you did your best, internally, nah, I kind of cut a corner here, or I backed out of a bold idea there, or something like that. So I would say that from our perspective, A+, you guys did your best and you achieved things that nobody else had. But I'm sure that when Ira says there are some things we could have done better, he means it. And he's not looking at it with 2020 goggles, and I mean from the year 2020, not hindsight is 2020 with the documentary. I'm sure he knows a couple little things that kind of grind on him that he thinks, I could have pushed a little harder, I could have snuck this in, I could have done something. So I take his word for it. But of course, those of us that are just fans, we're like, bro, don't be hard on yourself, you nailed it, relax. I don't know, what do you think, Sirach?
Yeah, well, first of all, kudos for Ira to have that kind of humility to be able to point out things that he thinks he may have done wrong. I mean, that to me is for a legendary stats and show that he put up, he could easily sit back and say, no, everything went perfectly. But the humility that he has allows him to say, no, I could have done things better. I could have done more. But I would say that he did a fantastic job. First of all, going back to casting, the choices that they made. I mean, that's not even getting into the stories yet. That's just picking the guy who's going to do the storytelling. Picking somebody like Avery Brooks was like an amazing decision for me. That showed a lot of foresight. It also showed that they were not afraid to have a black male lead of a Star Trek show in that time period. So already they're setting precedents without even saying a word at this point. Then you have them casting the Nah Visitor as the co-lead on this show, the Kira, who's playing the strong female character, which you don't see on television that much. Up until that point, in my brain, I can't remember too many female leads of shows that were that strong. I would say, especially in drama. I mean, in comedy, I can say somebody, for example, I thought Murphy Brown, that the show Murphy Brown had a strong female lead character. The way she presented herself was like no nonsense kind of a lead. But somebody in a drama who was doing what Kira was doing with this level of like bravado that is not really assigned to how we're supposed to stereotypically see female characters. And so I think she just knocked it out of the park with her, just shoulders back with her chin up, like chest out, and as a full kind of breath of fresh air for something that we hadn't seen before, that wasn't really fully given to us as an audience. So all of those choices were already done in casting. That's when they decided that's the guy we want to do it. That's the person, that person. And so already they're showing that they're willing to break whatever glass ceilings are out there or push boundaries farther than they have previously been pushed by taking these kinds of calculated risks on casting. And so then you get to the storyline and the meat of what they decide to write about when they directly attack these issues and speak on them directly. Yeah, Ira could have done more, but I think he did so tremendously well that, it's like, okay, a 9.7. Yes, there was a 0.3. It could have been a little bit better. Okay, but I mean, it's fantastic.
It's his punk rock roots. He was a fighter. He's counterculture.
Yeah. And it's any interview, it's never left him. You can see it on him. It's never left. It's funny now, if we were a clickbait article, we'll be like, right, Ciroc Slam says Ira could have done more. No. I think as well, and I do think, to be honest, I think DS9, it's understood that in the 90s in which it was operating, it went as far as it could go. You could only need to look at Discovery to go, a Star Trek in 2017 onwards, it's a different climate. It's a different world that it lives in. You can do more, which is not to talk away any of the achievements that Discovery has made, but it could do things and wouldn't get blocked at the censorship stage that DS9, even Next Generation, which, it made its attempts as well, and it was under even more scrutiny by having, everyone was, kind of from owner of Paramount down was staring at them going, oh really, you're going to put that in the script, are you you're going to try and get away with that? So I think DS9, there's a reason it's my favorite. I'm not just saying that because you're on the call, but it's a reason it's my favorite. It did a lot, and it did it as well in a way that it was very accessible. I mean, I was watching it in Ireland and in the 90s, and what is the outside world? Okay, again, Irish Tourism Board. I'm exaggerating, but it made it very accessible. Was there anything in the full 7 years where that truly came as a surprise, even at the time or in hindsight, where you're like, "Wow, they did that"?
Yeah, killing Dax's character, that was a surprise. Because she had been with us all that time and was really there from the beginning in the trenches, and we were so close to the finish line. It felt like a little bit. It was a hurtful thing, so that was a surprise. And then also at the end, I think the way it ended was a surprise too. How Cisco kind of ends his storyline on that show. Doesn't give us really enough closure as an audience, it leaves questions. It leaves more questions than answers, and so those two things were the biggest surprises for me.
Ryan,
surprises. I'm trying to put myself when I first watched it, and I also real quick I want to say When we're talking about how the writers were able to sneak in things that, normally might not have flown. When I was first watching it back in my youth, to be honest, total transparency, I didn't even notice it. I didn't think, hey, that's a black Star Trek captain and his black son, and there's two girls kissing. Like, it literally went way over my head because the writing was so good. The writing was so good that you're watching the story. You're paying attention to the story. They're people. They look like Ferengi, but these are people. These are relationships. This is not a Ferengi father and a Ferengi son. It's a father and son. This isn't a black father and a black son. It's a father and son. Now, there is also that stuff, which makes it so much better. And I think we actually have a better perspective on it now, looking back at how great it was. Maybe that's just me. But I just want to add that really shows how great the writing was too, that on first view, it didn't even enter my head. I was just watching great stories and great writing and a great show. But to things that shocked me, I was surprised about Dax dying, yes. I was surprised at the Jem'Hadar, because I remember that, whoa, Star Trek just got balls. I don't know, it just kind of It just kind of had like a different feel, but that's what Deep Space Nine was. It was Star Trek with balls, you know? It just like was saying, you know what? Let's just see what happens. Let's do something more. And Star Trek was always intellectual. It was always diplomatic. It was exploratory. It was progressive. It was intelligent. But Deep Space Nine made it edgy. Deep Space Nine made it dark. Deep Space Nine pushed the envelope. Deep Space Nine said, if we're not making you feel uncomfortable every once in a while, we're not doing our job. You know, so I think what surprised me was just the tone, the mood, the direction, the force that they're pushing forward and they're dragging you along with them, or you're going to get left behind. I think that was the most surprising thing, was just what it stood for, you know?
I think as well, because what you're saying is very familiar to me, because there's things that, which I now assign that in my lived experience, I didn't know to recognize some of the things I was seeing. I mean, again, I was very young when I was watching. I was a child. I did not understand an awful lot of the things. I remember going back and watching it as a teen and going, holy shit, you know, kind of, you know, oh, I get it now. I get what past tense is about, you know, things like that. Nor the battle to the strong, obviously, Sirach, which you mentioned earlier on, because I think one of the last things I'd like to discuss on this one is the depiction of mental health in DS9 is something that, I mean, that was certainly explored far more in DS9 than episodic nature. So I'm not having a dig at Next Generation TOS when I say that now. Episodic versus serialized, you have more room with serialization. But, you know, Sirach, Jake, and Nog are nearly two of the core characters I would think of when we think of the exploration of mental health on Deep Space Nine, nor the battle to the strong, because trauma right there from the beginning. You know, how much kind of prep time do you get for Nor the Battle to the Strong? Are you told, by the way, you can play PTSD, right? Go for it.
Yeah, you don't get any no prep time. Once the season starts rolling, you're that's it. You're going from one episode to the next episode. So you're filming one episode while you're getting the script for the next one. So it's the baton is constantly being passed off to the next runner. The only prep time you get is in the beginning, I guess, for the first episode of the season. That's when you get to sit with the first script for a little bit. And, okay, this is what we're doing. But once that starts, then it's like here, and then the revisions constantly happen. I mean, that was a constant thing of the revisions. So. Yeah, and then it's funny because they say, "Oh, you didn't get that? We sent it to you like at 4:00 in the morning." You're like,
right?
No, no, I didn't check my mail at 4:00 in the morning. Thanks for the delivery on that. But yeah, mental health is a serious thing. I always talk about it when we do the reviews on the show. We talk about how there is no device to cure it. You know, you have a tricorder. The tricorder can do, you know, they can do dermal regeneration. They can fix broken bones. And in some cases, they can infuse you with cybernetics. You know, we've seen that done with Picard to some degree. They can store you as a file inside of a program. They can run you as a program and store you as a file. And put you in the transporter log or whatever it is. So they can manipulate so many aspects of the physical world. But one thing that they are not able to do, even 1,000 years from now or 500 years into the future, is fix mental health. That's still something that needs to be dealt with through therapy, through time, through conversation. Through community. It's still something that is a sensitive thing, and we see that as an issue in the very beginning of the show when Cisco is, you know, is stuck in this moment, and that's what the prophets tell him. That's what the wormhole aliens tell him. They're like, you know, time. They ask him about time. and they say, you live in this moment. You live in this moment where where Jennifer dies. Why are you stuck in this moment? And they actually bring him back to that moment when they're kind of interacting with him in this vision that he gets. And that is what mental health is, really. It's about being stuck in a feeling or a moment, right? It is about holding on to trauma and saying, I'm permanently echoing inside of this moment, even though time has moved on. I cannot move on from this experience. And so, it's a real thing. I've dealt with it on a personal level. Millions of people have dealt with it. It's something that doesn't go away over time. It's just something that needs to be healed with time, with therapy, with loving friends and family. That's what it takes. And sometimes it can just be a stranger can help you. A stranger can help you get out of mental illness. A stranger can talk you off of the ledge of a bridge. A stranger can tell you that your life has meaning and that you're special. So it can come from so many different places. It can come from your meditation, from a religious experience, just so many different ways. But it still requires, it's still something that's not solved in the Star Trek universe, right? There's still no fix-it-all mental health button. We still have to live with those things. Picard still has to live with Wolf 359. It's still in the new season of the show, right? It still weighs on him, right?
They had in Discovery season 4, I believe, talking about that as well.
Yeah, it still weighs on him, and you never really escape it. You just learn how to deal with it. And obviously, the late great Aaron Eisenberg, I thought, did the best mental health episode of our show. It's Only a Paper Moon, I think, is the name of the episode, and that is one of the best ways to deal with it, because it showed our friction. It showed me as a good friend trying to help him out of it and trying to lift him out of that. It showed, and speaking of where you might get the help from, it may come from a computer program, which is what Vic Fontaine did for Nog, right? Vic got him out of that slumber. So, and then we see in another episode that has the word moon in it, Pale Moonlight. In the Pale Moonlight. That's another mental health episode, actually.
Wow.
Because it's talking about Sisko and how he's going to approach his own mental health going forward, saying, I'm going to live with this. I accept it. This is how I'm going to delete it here at this moment. I'm not going to let it echo into the future. This is where it'll stop. Have this emotional, honesty with myself and let it go forward.
And this is why everybody at home, Cirroc Lofton was asked to be helping, teaching at Stanford on Afrofuturism. For those of you that don't know, he just finished this past spring. He'd been flying back and forth from doing our show in LA to flying over at Stanford, you may have heard of it, and teaching Afrofuturism to the young, impressionable, intelligent minds there. So because of things like that. That was a good call, Cirroc.
That's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Let me get my headphones so I can log in to work.
Yeah, no problem. Can I just add on mental health a little bit? I think that mental health it's so much more important than I initially realized, as a kid. I think it might be the most important issue of today. And for me, I've always found it most important to be a voice for the voiceless, right? That's animals, that's children, that's the environment. And in a lot of ways, that's mental health. Because a lot of times with mental health issues, maybe they don't know or they can't properly voice what they need or what the problem is. So how do we help that? Well, I've been very fortunate to not have to worry too much about that. We've all had bad days, but for some people, they have bad weeks or bad months, or they feel like they have a bad life. And so how, for someone like me, or for even people that do suffer from it, how do you help that out? Well, even coming and saying, hey, I'm there if you need anything, sport, they're still not going to ask for help, or they're not going to know how to say it. A lot of times the best you could do is just present yourself as somebody that they can reach out to. Present yourself as somebody that they trust, they can talk to, they feel comfortable around, or at least one less person they have to worry about. Because a lot of times, people, you kind of want to avoid certain people. You're like, I don't trust that dude. That dude sounds terrible. And so, a lot of it's just leading with kindness, or in this month, especially leading with love. And one more thing on that, saying, let me know if you need anything. 99% of the time, they're not going to ask you for anything. But if you say, hey, I'm on my way, that's it. You've done it for them. So just be that person that says, I'm on my way. I got Gatorade and popcorn, or whatever it happens to be. Be that person. If they really, really, really don't want it, they'll say no. Because some people are going to say, oh, no, that's okay. The texting is fine. But a lot of times they'll at least appreciate the gesture. We hear you great.
I think that's a really good point as well. Yeah, for some people, it will sometimes the removal, the texting that actually is beneficial, that perhaps they can't articulate how they might feel in person, or the pressure to articulate how they feel is taken off them slightly if there is that removal. And then other times, like you say, I'm at the door, could be exactly what the person needed at that point in time, because they couldn't, for whatever reason, the world was very right here in front of them and they needed something to open it out. I'm speaking, but I'm badly describing an experience of my own past, where sometimes I needed someone to give me a shake and sometimes I needed someone to give me space. And I think all of that is in Paper Moon, funnily enough. Both give him space and nope, now he needs a shake. And all of that is there, it's present. And not to make light of it, but I'm sorry you got a drink and a table thrown over you as part of his journey. But
yeah,
sometimes
that's not though. He makes up for it in Gold Press Latinum on the back end.
He does. Did you ever pay him back for the card?
No. Don't mention that. Don't bring that up. If he doesn't, if he doesn't say anything, I don't remember.
I checked that card on the Beckett Guide recently, and it's going up. Remember the Beckett Guides?
Yeah, I remember the Beckett. Yeah. Beckett is a guide that prices the baseball, basketball cards, and
right.
So we used to run to get the Beckett, little magazine that was printed up, and you'd look up your card and tops 1986, and you'd see if
and
it
we'd
went
be
up
so
or
excited.
down.
We'd be like, oh man, it went from 12 cents to 15 cents.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy.
Yeah, it was the stock market for kids.
It was
actually.
Totally.
Yeah, adjusted for $2024, that's like $1.9 million.
Yeah, tell
good.
me about it. Yeah. But yeah, going back to the mental health, I do think it's also one of the things that North the Battle to the Strong talked about was this tough exterior that we like to try to wear, and being vulnerable and saying, no, that's not exactly how I feel. And kind of being honest with yourself is another way to deal with these kinds of emotions when you go through them. I say that because I've had this, I know this from firsthand experience, having my own issues, and having people that have been really instrumental in helping me kind of break the funk that I was in. So I know that somebody out there who's listening may relate to these words and say, oh, you know what? Let me just talk to somebody about how I feel and be honest about it. Because that's usually the first step to your path to healing is acknowledging it and talking with somebody about it. It's hard because we want to look like these infallible, strong people that can take on anything, but sometimes you have to be vulnerable with yourself and do an evaluation and say, you know, is this hurting me deeply, and I need to really truly heal from it. So that happens with acknowledgement.
Yep, I think none of us are a god made by the prophets. We are all human. You know, we are. You know, there's the things we are capable of dealing with at that time, and the things we're not capable of dealing with at the time. And there's a lot to be said as well for community and for feeling that safety to be honest. And that is something that, to be honest with you, I credit the Star Trek community so much for that. That there is this willingness, this openness to listen, to speak. Sure, we're like every family. There's some people who, you know, kind of like, oh, that's the difficult uncle. But that's in every community, do you know? And it's one thing where it's very normalized to have these talks about mental health, to have an understanding of identity and who we are, and to question, you know, what we might believe as truth, which is, again, something I thank Star Trek for.
And I love this community too, by the way. The Star Trek community is amazing because it is really one of the most accepting communities there is. It doesn't matter who you are, what background you are, what's your economic status. You know, we accept everybody as they are, as long as they're willing to come to the table and love Star Trek with us, you know. But that's it.
It's a small ask, Joe, and if you do
requirement.
That,
and so, you know, that's why, you know, everybody feels welcome when, you know, in this community. And I'm honored to be a part of a community that has this kind of ideals for. It's going to take a bunch of Star Trek people to build the future that Star Trek envisioned for us. People that are willing to accept each other's differences, accept each other for who they are, and work together for a common good, a common goal. Once we get past all of that, we will have this utopian future of exploration and science and no monetary needs and all of these things that we strive for. But it will take for us to accept each other for who we are, not be fighting over those differences, and also working together for common goal of greater good.
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, we'll all be dead, but I'm looking forward to it for our ancestors.
Absolutely. Well, we can all join in the Bell riots in September, so that'll be fun.
Yeah. It's coming up.
That's it. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll bring this episode to a close. We'll have our meeting about how we're going to approach September for sure. But to everyone who is watching along, thank you so much for watching along. So Rock and Ryan, thank you both so much for joining us and for having such an open conversation about Star Trek, about what DS9 has done, and about, not to put it in small, but about what you have brought to both Star Trek and the community as well. It is very much appreciated from over here in Ireland. It is very much appreciated, I can tell you that.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Sean.
Yeah.
Tons of fun. You're always great. And I'm not sure what we're doing in September, but I know we're going to see you in August. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I am very, very excited. I will try and remember to rein in my excitement to see you and not kind of rugby tackle you in a hallway and actually announce myself. I'm like, hello, it's Sean from the podcast. I'm saying that because I won't say who, but I did very much shock someone before. And I was like, I should have announced myself first. That was a silly way of saying hello. So if any of that person is watching this, I'm so sorry again.
It's exciting.
But look, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for watching along. This has been fun. This has been a lot of fun. So you are both lovely. And although you can't see him, Chris, thank you very much. Chris is in the background moderating this entire video as well. So thank you very much, Chris. I know you're there. And we will see you all very, very soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.